Welcome to OAA Now, your home for Oakland Activities Association news and information. Here's your host, Sammy Taormina.
Welcome to OAA Now. Here I'm Sammy Taormina, blogger around the OAA, the host of Last Week Brain Cells, and the host between Taormina's and Orion Neighborhood Television. I'd like to welcome those watching on the local voice on SoundCloud and those watching Orion Television. This week we got a special guest here. I'm talking one segment this week on the podcast here. We got the host of History Now and my co-host on Between Taorminas. I'm Anthony Taormina.
And your brother.
Yep, and Anthony, welcome back to the O1 TV studios after a couple month hiatus, and then now you're likely going to be doing History Now, coming back, and then we'll go from there.
Pleasure to be here.
The big story here we're going to talk about, obviously, is going to be the big news of the day is, of course, on Friday. The OAA, Farmington Schools made an announcement confirmed to Brendan Fossum, Hometown Life, that they are leaving the OAA to join the Lakes Valley Conference in 2026-2027. So I want to get your early thoughts on this move and what impacts, that on the Farmington Schools departing the league will do for the future of the OAA.
First things first, it's a pleasure being here. You've done a fantastic job with you've done a fantastic job with the podcast. You've done tremendous job with a lot of people look up to you, and you just keep doing good things.
Appreciate it.
What do I think about the Farmington move to the Lakes Valley? For those, I want to do a little bit of a history before you had the Western Lakes Activities Association of Western Lakes, which had the Farmingtons, the Walled Lakes, the Livonias. I believe the South Lions might have been there.
I thought they were in the.
They were in the Kensington.
They were in the Kensington, yeah.
So
they were in the KBC.
Right, but they had. So what happened was this was at a time where they didn't have Walled Lake Northern or Plymouth. Give thanks to Southern football for that. The Farmingtons, when they first entered the OAA, it was because of enrollment discrepancy, and they were the three smallest at the time, and also there was also that competitive. They wanted to test with the OAA. So, and the Western Lakes was declining till eventually they merged into the with the Kensingtons to go into the KLA. So the departure of the Farmingtons, just like when Lake Orion, Oxford, Clarkson, the whole with Lapeer, Grand Blanc, Davison gets talked about. There were talks about the Farmingtons potentially leaving for the Lakes Valley, and obviously it's confirming to light now. But at that time, you didn't think anything for it at the time. But the move to the Lakes Valley, and obviously also the Livonia schools also going to the Lakes Valley as well, it moves the Lakes Valley to 12 schools. Ultimately, you added 5. The Waterford schools is inevitable. They're going to come to the OAA, both Kettering and Mott. It ended up in a way becoming a trade with the Waterford schools to the OAA in return for the Farmingtons to the Lakes Valley. This year the OAA is going to have 25 schools, and that's and then in 2 years they're going to go to 23.
Well, the Waterfords are coming in the winter. They're coming in the winter.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
I think the impacts, the reasons why the Farmingtons are leaving for the Lakes Valley is because of travel and because of competitive balance in a way, enrollment, more in line with their demographics. Farmington's going to be the biggest school coming into the Lakes Valley. They had a big enrollment hike this year. And then North Farmington's right there about 1,200, 1,300 kids. I would say that it was the travel. One of the biggest frustrations also with the OAA, as you know, is travel. you're often having to leave school early for a 4 o'clock game, or especially if you're having to go from south to north or north to south. It's you have to deal with the traffic, you have to deal with all that stuff, and there just was, and it was just challenging. I mean, you can look at, okay, if you're Farmington, North Farmington, why are you going to a Lake Orion or a Clarkston or an Oxford? When your rivals, you have rivals that are in the Livonia area, in the Walled Lake area that are far closer. I look at when we went to Farmington for football. It was very, very quiet. There was not very many fans in the seats. It's just the lack of a natural rival. Like, say for example, Farmington, North Farmington, that sells out places. So I would say travel and I would say natural rivalries are very much a big reason for why the Farmingtons considered leaving for the Lakes Valley.
Well, when you look at the rivalries, I mean, obviously, you look at the Farmington schools, their rivals are obviously, you got the Livonia schools, you got Livonia Stevenson, Livonia Franklin, Livonia Churchill. When you look at from a sports standpoint, I mean, everybody looks at football being the king. And you look at with Farmington and North Farmington, the football programs, obviously when they came in the OAA, obviously Harrison was the team to talk about. Obviously
Harrison was in Division 1.
They're in Division 1.
Farmington and North Farmington, I believe, were both in Division 3.
And you look at, of course, with Harrison closing in 2017. 2018. I got to get that on the blog corrected. But I really think when you look at that rivalry with North Farmington and Farmington, not playing 1 year in football, that kind of really...
It was 2019, I'm sorry.
That 1 year that they didn't play. I mean, like, that kind of, like, the scheduling, and you know how that is. But you kind of think, how important that rivalry is in Farmington. I mean, those two teams, they battle for a trophy.
Cup.
The Farmington Cup. We know that they So when you look at the decision that they made, and they said they looked at travel, they looked at what the families were thinking, and they were thinking that, you know what I mean, like, just the travel aspect of it. But when you look at from a future standpoint, do you think that this move, could this hurt them come postseason time? Because that is a good question to ask, because you look at, of course, yes, you want to be geographically close. Yes, you want to be like, but you look at when you look at districts, you look at when you go to the regional. I mean, like, when you go to the regional, obviously having 2 schools or 3 schools, it kind of puts you in a little bit of a disadvantage a little bit, unless you're like one big town.
I think in a kid's mindset, as their mindsets are, I'm not saying about everyone, but I'm saying this is quite a bit. This is the mindset of a kid is, I don't care who I play, I just want to play. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to take the time to learn about a new league, or they're not going to take the time. Some will. I'm not saying that. Some will. I mean, we see it. A perfect example would be when I went to Farmington for boys basketball. Farmington has 3 very good people that are extremely knowledgeable with learning about the OAA. Their bookkeeper, she coached a while for Farmington. Their timekeeper, who coaches baseball. Also their athletic director. In terms of, like, those are 3 very good sources for the kids if they want to learn about Farmington and the OAA and, in the Western Lakes history. I mean, those are 3 perfect history examples. As far as, like, the big primary reasons, I said it, like, with travel, with competitive balance, how's it going to impact? It's going to depend on the sport. I think in certain sports, it's going to be good. I think in certain sports, it's going to also be a downgrade. I think that because the OAA, it was a lot more, in many ways, the OAA is a lot more competitive. And that's not knocking the Lakes Valley at all. It's just how the competitiveness, there's more schools in the OAA, and it just basically was more, Lakes Valley, it's a little more compact. Now it's going to grow more because you got 12 schools, but it's still a little more compact. And that's kind of like one of the bigger reasons why the Waterfords are going back to the OAA is because in the Lakes Valley, it's very compact. It's like you still got those enrollment discrepancies. And, the Waterfords probably weren't able to compete in the Lakes Valley with the enrollment discrepancies.
But in the Lakes Valley, you look at that one and you say to yourself, you got 2 or 3 schools in each school district. I mean, you look at Walled Lake, 3 schools. You look at South Lyon, 2 schools. You look at Farmington, 2 schools. You look at Livonia, 3 schools. I mean,
Milford and Lakeland.
Huron Valley, 2 schools. So you basically look at that and say to yourself, okay, you're looking at, you got rivalries there within your school district, but when you get into a postseason standpoint, that could be a sign of concern when you look at the districts, the regionals, and I've said this on many occasions.
Well, a lot of it depends on who you schedule in your non-league. I will use North Farmington boys basketball. Todd Negocian does a fantastic job.
I want to talk him in a couple minutes here, okay? But and especially the impact of the boys program at North Farmington, because that's
Farmington as well.
And Farmington as well. That's gonna be a big one here. But I'll let you continue.
My point is that it's gonna depend on what sport it is. Okay, so say for example, girls basketball. Okay, you got some competitive games right there on the horizon with Farmington, Livonia, Stevenson, or Farmington, Livonia, Franklin, or Farmington, Livonia, Churchill.
North Farmington, they're a young team.
North Farmington's going to have those competitive games too. It's going to depend on what sport you're in. Football, you're going to have quite a bit of competitive games as well. Just in terms of the matchups that you'll see, they're going to be fresh, different matchups. They're going to be competitive. Every game's going to be a battle every week, just like it was in the OAA. You'll have new opportunities in so many sports. The big thing that I'm going to miss with the Farmingtons is how competitive they were in multiple sports. North Farmington, you think of girls basketball, you think of softball, you think of so many other
swimming.
Farmington, you think about
swimming
track
as well.
You think about track, swimming, baseball. Boys basketball is getting back there. Girls basketball at times. The Farmingtons were so competitive in so many sports, and that provided a very good balance in the OAA. I think that's the big thing that the OAA is going to miss with the Farmingtons is just the competitiveness, they fit that Southwest blueprint of the OAA so well. But I also think too, travel was a challenge, especially from a northern school perspective. And I bet they felt the same way about coming up north. I just think the competitiveness that they provide in so many sports is going to be something that the league is going to miss.
Let's talk about specific sports. Obviously, the big one is boys basketball. And you look at, we know the program that Coach Todd Negocian's done at North Farmington. We know the program that Coach Byron Johnson's done at Farmington. What is the impact of changing leagues going to affect both these two programs?
I'll start with Farmington first. Byron Johnson has completely changed Farmington for the better. He really, really has, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. And I've said that to him in person, both at Farmington, at the league meeting, and I'll say it here on your podcast. He has made Farmington into a much better place for boys basketball, and you see with the numbers, and kids want to play for him, and he's been such a positive influence for the Falcons community. It's definitely been a really, really good for Farmington. In North Farmington, I'll say Todd Negocian, part of the Negocian legacy. He's been there forever. I've known Todd for when he was a grad assistant at Oakland. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. A true ambassador for boys basketball. It's tough for me to think that Todd's not going to be in the OA anymore, especially with he really stood out within the league. Now for boys basketball, a lot of people could see this as a potential downgrade for both schools because both schools compete in the competitive OAA, and the Lakes Valley could be seen as a downgrade.
Well, North's in the red, and then of course Farmington's been in the white.
Right, but I also think the competitiveness between the OAA and the Lakes Valley is very, very different. So I'm going to be curious to see if the Farmington schools will enhance the Lakes Valley in terms of a competitive standpoint, or are they going to be in the middle of the whole Lakes Valley challenge? Because right now, and to me, it seems like North and Farmington, the Farmingtons both stand out when it comes to boys basketball. And it's going to be a challenge for the Lakes Valley. It's actually going to be a good thing for Lakes Valley to, compete to the level that North Farmington and Farmington have. The success, especially with North Farmington in boys basketball, it'll be good for the Lakes Valley. North Farmington, I'm going to be really curious to see what their non-conference schedule is, because in many ways, their rivalry with Clarkston was sensational. In many ways, North Farmington took over what Pontiac Northern was back in the late 2000s. In terms of Pontiac Northern was the rival to Clarkston, but then when Pontiac Northern merged with Pontiac Central, it'd be Pontiac, and their enrollment, North Farmington took that role, and excuse me, and it benefited both teams. So Farmington, obviously, they've been the constant, either red or white, sometimes blue. They've been getting it together.
When you look at, of course, the rivalries with North, I mean, obviously the Clarkson rivalry. I mean, you really look at that rivalry and you say to yourself, that Clarkson's had it early against North. Obviously when Dan was there. The importance of that rivalry. I read Farmington Public Schools athletic directors, the main AD Alyssa Robinson, saying that they're gonna try to keep those rivalries, that they have with the OAA, close to the vest, and they make it into a non-conference. Do you see North Farmington or Farmington booking other OA teams in the future, with their move to the Lakes Valley?
I think I see North Farmington and Clarkston continuing their rivalry. I think that it's good for both sides. I think that North and I definitely think that one will probably stay. As far as other non-league with the OAA, it's hard to say. It would be interesting to see if they were to keep those rivalries with the OAA. I don't know if it's going to be immediate in terms of, especially with Farmington. But you never know. I do think that the closest one that I see probably being kept is North Farmington and Clarkston. If anything, with Farmington, I think you might see them play West Bloomfield a couple times. I mean, it's just hard to say, but I think the one that stands out in boys basketball would be North Farmington and Clarkston.
And when you look at other sports, softball, obviously North Farmington's in the red.
Yep.
For them, it's basically you're leaving Lake Orion, Oxford, Stony Creek, to be in a league with Livonia Stevenson. We know how good Livonia Stevenson is in softball. So what other sports you think that this move to Lakes Valley is going to impact the most? And we already talked boys basketball. What other sports do you think?
I think that it's going to impact all the sports because you look at, football, North Farmington have been pretty good programs in football. They'll challenge in the Lakes Valley. Obviously,
Walled Lake Western.
Walled Lake Western's the standard bearer in football. Girls basketball, it's going to be pretty competitive especially with the Livonia schools
Livonia
there.
Stevenson is very good.
Walled Lake Western's not bad. They're solid.
Walled Lake Central. Walled Lake Northern's been very good.
I said Walled Lake Northern. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I think that all the sports going to affect baseball. Obviously, Farmington's been solid in baseball. Track and field, Farmington's been very solid, especially in the girls. Softball, North Farmington, Livonia Stevenson. You know that old saying, iron sharpens iron, and I think it'll be good in all the sports for the Farmingtons and what they'll provide for the Lakes Valley, just like what Waterford will provide for the OAA.
And when you look at what the Farmingtons and then we look at the Waterfords, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Waterfords. What was your thought process when you heard the news about Waterford schools coming into the OAA?
Why'd they leave in the first place? That was when that happened, it was like, why did they leave in the first place? Because you looked at in the OAA at that time, Waterford Mott, Waterford Kettering were both in the lowest divisions, and then they decided to go with the merged KLAA, the Kensington Lakes Activities Association, and their reasoning for leaving was because they felt they couldn't compete in the OAA. And now their reasonings for coming back is because the Lakes Valley is so compact and you get more opportunities to play schools your size. It was like when they came back, yeah, I'm happy they're back. Don't get me wrong. I am happy Kettering and Mott are back. But at the same time, it's like, why did you leave? Because the OAA, you have a league where it's so, you can play schools your school size. You can play teams within your competitiveness. That's why we have the beauty of having the divisions for. Whereas in like these in leagues like the Lakes Valley, it's so compact. Now they're probably going to go 2 divisions now. But, when you have 9 schools like the Lakes Valley has, it's, it can get compact, and that can be challenging.
And when you look at the sports that Waterford brings, obviously, you got football, you got boys basketball, they're separate, you know what I mean? Track and field are separate. Girls basketball, they're unified.
Many sports that Waterford has is unified. Boys and girls lacrosse are unified. They are, girls basketball, they're unified. Swim and dive, they're unified. It's, so there's a lot of sports that they're unified in. One thing that I'm going to be curious to see is in the next few years is Waterford, the enrollment at both Waterford schools is like, Mott's like almost at 1,000. Kettering is barely below 1,000. So the question is, are they going to merge down the line? Do you see them merging down the line, or are they going to stay as 2 separate schools? Their facilities are nice, yes, don't get me wrong. But I'm really curious. I'm going to be really curious to see in the next few years is the Waterford's going to merge, a lot like what Royal Oak, Bloomfield Hills, Pontiac, Southfield all did. I'm going to be really, really curious to see how it goes with the Waterfords being back. But with Kettering and Mott both back, it definitely helps the smaller schools. Definitely helps in terms of like school size. They're not as big as the Farmingtons are, but they're still good schools in the area. So
my thoughts, I want to go back to Farmington for a minute, a couple minutes here. My thoughts on Farmington. I look at this move for them. It makes sense geographic-wise, travel-wise, it makes sense for them to lead the league. But I got some serious concerns about when they get in the postseason. Are they going to be competitive enough? Are they going to be battle-tested enough? That's really where I have the biggest concern with both Farmington schools, because the OAA is going to prepare you for the postseason. I don't know if the Lakes Valley Conference will do that. And I think that's really where I have basically the biggest concern that I have with this move. Now, they're going to say, well, we're going to be better. I'm just saying, how are you going to look at it from when you have to go play your non-conference, where you're going to have to, when you have to go play a postseason, whereas you look at, like, for example, like a Farmington, going to have to play a PSL team, or like, in the postseason, or like or like if you're North Farmington, you're looking at possibly playing an OAA type of team. You might be also staring Orchard Lake St. Mary's in the face.
Well, again, that comes down to how you schedule your non-conference. When I think about boys basketball, Todd Negoshin's one of the best in the business when it comes to scheduling non-league games. I mean that because he does a fantastic job finding teams to play that will prepare him for the playoffs. Farmington's the same way, albeit not the level of North, but Todd does a really good job at scheduling.
The Lakes Valley might not prepare them, because you look at, of course, that conference, Wall Lake Central, you look at that team, they're probably going to be on the downward slope. Lakeland and Milford are not consistent teams. I mean, you look at
They work hard. All three of those teams work hard. All three of those teams work. The Lakes Valley works hard. It's going to be different for sure. It's going to be an adjustment period for both the Farmington schools, but I think they're more than capable of handling it. And it also comes down to non-conference scheduling. I mean, it's not just for boys basketball, but it's for all the sports, That's what it really comes down to. I mean, at the end of the day, in the mind of a kid, I don't care who I play. I just want to play. That's all that matters to me.
It'll be very interesting to see, especially when you look at, and then let's look at next year for North Farmington in their last year in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is like their farewell tour. And you look at, of course, the divisions there, particularly for football. Both teams are in the blue.
Yep.
And obviously they get to play each other.
Yep.
When you look at the Raiders and the Falcons, I know with North Farmington, they got a quarterback in the way in them, and Stone Trevino, who's going to be a really good quarterback coach, John Herstein. Farmington, we know they were a playoff team last year for Coach Jason Albright. So when you look at it from a football perspective, obviously, you look at Farmington, and they could be a team that could win the division in their final year. They got a shot.
It wouldn't surprise me if Farmington goes Division I for playoffs, just because their enrollment increase. They had they're almost at 1,600 kids. Obviously the enrollments in general are down for the entire state, so it wouldn't surprise me if Farmington goes Division I for football. North Farmington will probably be Division II. They could be Division III, but I don't see that being likely. I think they'll be Division II. How they look in the league, it'll be interesting to see how they do in obviously year 2 of this alignment. I think Farmington, in terms of numbers, excuse me, has a really good chance of winning. But you never know, Some team will surprise you. The Blue also has 7 teams, so you got 7 great teams in the Blue. So
and we know about Scott Merchant at Bloomfield Hills. We know about that.
Yeah.
And we obviously know about Seaholm. We know it's going to be tough. We know that Oak Park. We don't know what you're going to expect under Coach Greg Carter. Troy Athens has got some questions for Coach Tom Cook, and Troy could really much struggle this year. But
maybe not. Who knows?
But when you look at your final take here on Farmington, on the Farmington schools leaving, obviously travel makes a lot of sense.
Travel, natural rivalries. Those were pretty much your big reasons why they're leaving the OAA. In the end of the day, you see how competitive in all sports the Farmington schools are. That's the big thing you're going to miss out of the OAA, out of them being in the OAA. Just the competitiveness, they really made a tough situation when they first came into the league, all 3 schools, and they made the situation work. And Farmington was able to, for 24, 25 years, they were able to make it work. 24, 25, 26 years, they made it work. And, so for over 20 years, Farmington has been in the OAA and has been very successful in multiple sports. Now we'll see how they do in the Lakes Valley. Obviously, it's a smaller conference. It'll based upon what sports they are in. They match up well in some sports, and then there's some they don't. But we'll see how it goes for them. And congratulations to Farmington for joining the Lakes Valley. And I think they'll do really well there in general.
Okay, so that's it. At OAA, History Now's host Anthony Taormina here. Thank you for joining here on the pod this week. Here talking about the Farmington departure of the OAA to the Lakes Valley.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so when we come back, we're gonna talk about girls basketball recaps. Also, we're gonna talk about boys basketball shortcomings. Of course, that was one of the things I wanted you on also, Anthony, was to talk boys basketball shortcomings. Of course, we're at the end of the year. So
I can stick around for that.
Okay, we could talk boys basketball before we preview the girls side of things. When you look at the end of the year, of course, boys basketball, Orchard Lake St. Mary's fell to East Lansing. East
Lansing won the whole thing.
They won the whole thing in D1.
And then Warren Lincoln won
D2. So when you look at the OA next year, 25 schools, recapping the year that the league had. Talk about, what was your biggest surprises? What's your biggest disappointments? What was your thoughts about the league?
I think the biggest surprise this year was certain teams were good, and then you saw certain teams just really struggled. I was very surprised with Harper Woods with how they struggled this year. I thought that Harper Woods would be better. I thought Oak Park, despite being well coached, I was surprised with how Oak Park used to be in the red. I thought they'd have a better showing in the white. And I'm not disrespecting any teams at all. I was surprised with Berkeley. Yeah, they had injuries, but still I was very surprised.
They were one of the teams I was surprised with.
Royal Oak, I thought finished better than I thought they would have been. Stony Creek, I thought Stony would have been better this year.
Stony's been
they've been Jekyll and Hyde.
They're Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, you really look at with what Jeff Owen in his 3 years. I mean, over at Stony Creek. I mean, he's really struggled over there.
They've been Jekyll and Hyde. Southfield and Ferndale University, I thought finished better than I thought they would be. They would have been. I was very impressed with Ferndale University being competitive. Southfield under Terrence. Terrence is a great coach. He always gets the best out of his kids. I also, when I look at the red, I was a little bit surprised by West Bloomfield. I thought West Bloomfield would do better. With they were very young this year.
Their defense was a big problem this year.
I was a little bit surprised with West Bloomfield this year in the boys.
Their defense was bad.
Boys, in the white, obviously, I was impressed with Farmington. Troy, I kind of was like, Troy was middle of the pack. I was impressed with Athens. Athens feels like they're going up. Seaholm feels like they're going up. Expected with Lake Orion and Oxford. Obviously, Lake Orion, Oxford, that second game was very much a classic. They could have went either way. And just, Avondale, Groves. I was surprised Avondale beat Clarkson 3 times. Clarkson's kind of been the consistent of the OAA for a long time. Groves winning it was a surprise because I thought that Groves would compete. I didn't think they'd win the league. So I was very impressed with Groves.
And when you look at next year, you look at the teams to watch.
And then Ferndale was young this year, so their future's bright too.
When you look at the teams next year, who are you keeping an eye on heading into next year?
I would say Farmington. Farmington's kind of a team that's Farmington's really on the rise because you look at they got 3 quality programs with the freshmen, the JVs, and then their varsity. They also don't lose a lot either. Obviously Ferndale as well in the red. Ferndale was very, very young this year.
Well, they got Ian Vineyard coming back. That's a big deal when you look at what he brings for Coach Juan Rickman. You really look at what they got. Ferndale, they got a Warren Lincoln problem. That's the only thing that they got.
Well,
the last 2 years they were knocked out by the
this year. I mean, Warren Lincoln might be going a little bit downhill after this year.
They do lose a lot.
They lose a lot. So, I mean, Ferndale's just got to keep plugging away, and I think Ferndale will. Juan's doing a tremendous job with them, and he will continue to do a tremendous job with them. Another team to keep an eye on, Troy Athens and Seaholm are 2 teams you want to keep an eye on as well because they both have strong sub-varsity programs, and they both have potential to do some really, really good things going forward. Stony Creek, obviously the question will be, can they make the jump from JV to varsity? That's the big question for them. Rochester, my goodness. I mean, they won the blue this year. Their JV was solid. Their
they won a district
solid.
title.
They won a district title. Rochester probably going to make the move up. Nick Bola's done a really, really good job for that program up there. And, I mean, he's going to continue to keep doing good things over there.
You look at the players that they have over there. Max Mull has been – I was really impressed with Jake Tandy. They do got another Tandy in the program there. But when you look at Rochester, obviously, they could be a really scary team for years to come.
They have the potential to be. I mean, that's but the old saying, you can't live off potential. You gotta get the job done. And Rochester was able to, they were able to compete well in the blue. They won the blue. Obviously, big wins over Pontiac and Bloomfield Hills and Stony Creek. Those were big wins for them. I think that Rochester, the sky's the limit for them. I think that it'll be really, really interesting to see how Rochester does. I am going to be really curious to see how Oxford adjusts to life without that senior class, because that senior class was very special for Oxford. A lot of them played 3-4 years up on varsity. They had to overcome a lot of things. You had the unthinkable. You had then you had the growing pains as well, and then to have the type of season that they had, and now those 9 seniors are gone. 8 seniors, 9 seniors. It's gonna be an adjustment period, and I'm gonna be really curious to see how Oxford does. And obviously, in Lake Orion's case, obviously you lose quite a bit of seniors as well. You do return some, and your JV was very good as well. So I'm gonna be really curious to see how Lake Orion adjusts to that as well.
I think a team I'm keeping an eye on is Clarkston, because you look at what happened to them. Coach Tim, they lost Avenel 3 times. They lost him 3 times. And they lose some key pieces. I think they lose like 6 seniors. I know the big one they lose is John Call and Quinn Rosenberg. Those are 2 big losses.
You don't know what's going to happen with Flavin.
You don't know what happened with Flavin either. I mean, that's really the big question. You don't know. So if you're Coach Tim Wasilic, what are you looking at this offseason?
Clarkson's JV and Clarkson's freshmen have always been good.
Freshmen went undefeated this year. JV,
they've always been good. They're so well coached, especially in the freshman levels. No, their JV, they're well coached too, but not like the freshmen.
Jack Cunningham's done a really nice job of that program.
And I'm not disrespecting their Nicholson at all because he's a great coach as well. Cunningham has went undefeated the last 2 years, I believe. Maybe 3. I'll have to check. But he has done such a sensational job preparing them from middle school all the way to freshman year. I think what helps too is the 8th and 9th graders are in the junior high, so that kind of prepares them. So they're in the same. Yeah, they're in the same building. But he's done a tremendous job at building them. And thing about Clarkston, and I said this, is consistent. and they're kind of the standard. Everybody wants to be Clarkston, and they've earned that credit. They've earned that mantle because they've been so consistent from going from the Fife levels, all the way up to senior year. Clarkston's been consistent, and that's a credit to first the late Dan Fife, God bless him, and then Tim Wasilic continuing that legacy over at Clarkston. And, and Cunningham's a big part of that, especially in terms of preparing them for high school ball.
And you think that's going to be the most important? Obviously, you're going from middle school to, playing high school ball. I mean, that's not an easy adjustment.
No, not at all.
When you look at, of course, you're only playing at least 12 games in middle school to playing 22 in a season. That's not easy at all when you look at it. And a lot of these middle schools obviously got feeder programs. You look at how important is the feeder program is to each team.
Well, let's talk about first the game adjustment. Obviously, you're going from 12 games to 22. I mean, at the end of the season, if you're a freshman, it takes its toll on you because you're not used to that. You're not used to playing that late in the year. So so it's definitely a tremendous adjustment, and I give a lot of freshman coaches all the credit in the world for keeping their kids focused. Case in point, I'll look at Lake Orion's freshman. Coach Chris Marshall's done a really, really great job with our freshman group. He's been really, really positive, really encouraging. Kids all love him. Kids love playing for him. With freshman coaches, if the kids love playing for you, good things are going to happen. And I think at the end of the year, it shows, and it shows not just the success on the court, but more so off of it. And I think that those small things make big differences. And I think the feeder programs are tremendous because you have a lot of tremendous middle schools that develop into, to help prepare for high school. And I think that it certainly helps.
Okay, so any final thoughts on this season of boys basketball?
I think it was a good year. It really, I'm going to be really curious to see how Waterford Mott and Waterford Kettering come into the OA, especially Waterford Mott. Will they continue to enhance boys basketball? I'm going to be really curious to see how it all goes going forward.
I want to get your thoughts on Steve Emmert leaving Waterford Kettering. There was a struggle this year. It was a struggle this year for Waterford Kettering. What is your thoughts on Kettering and Mott, both those teams coming in?
Well, first, let's talk about Mott first with Jeff Jason, our old friend Jeff Jason coming back to the OAA. It's very interesting because I feel like Jeff's at a very different point this time around compared to the first time around. I think that he's a lot more mellow this time around compared to his first year, which is a good thing, because you learn from everything. And I think with Mott coming in it'll be really good for Mott. It's new competition. It's so it'll be interesting to see after coming out of the Lakes Valley being really successful.
But they lose a lot though.
Yes, they do. And then with Kettering, it's starting from scratch. I mean, Emmert has been a very successful coach for a long time. Obviously, coaching in the Lakes Valley, then coached at Oxford in the girls program, and then going over to Kettering. Kettering was going to be a challenge anyways, and he tried to make it work. And it's just it's a challenge when you have that much changeover and to build a program, and it's a challenge when you have as much changeover as Kettering has had in the last several years. Hopefully a new start for Kettering will do some good for them.
And it'll be very interesting to see what Waterford Kettering, because they're going to be a team that they do got some experience coming back.
They do.
They do. I mean, the question's going to be is, that's a program that needs some stability. They need somebody to stay in there long term. And obviously, you look at the change in athletic. Shane Hines is there at Waterford Kettering.
Shane Hines was very instrumental in bringing the Waterfords into the OAA.
Obviously, we know his history with Troy.
Mhm.
He's
And also Clarkston.
and at Clarkson, he did a really good job at Troy.
As their AD, yes.
As their AD, he did a really
Very
good
building
job there. And I think, he's bringing his magic over to Waterford Kettering. Alongside Allison Sartorius, the superintendent over there.
No, she's the Waterford District AD.
Okay, my apologies.
Mhm.
But you look at the impact that the Waterfords are going to bring, obviously, in the boys basketball circuit. They start up league play in 2025, 2026.
Mhm.
So it'll be very interesting to see how Waterford, especially Kettering and Mott, both those teams, how they do in the OAA this year.
How they adjust to life in the OA, it'll be very interesting. As I said to you, we've had these discussions where Waterford has several teams have unified sport, are united, and then you have Kettering and Mott in certain sports: football, basketball, boys basketball, track, baseball. I mean, you know.
And then let's go from boys basketball to girls basketball. Obviously, this is the last week of girls basketball season.
Mhm.
West Bloomfield is the last team remaining for the OAA. Obviously, we know the success that they've had. They're the defending Division I state champions.
Yep.
When you look at the Lakers, they had a nice postseason. They knocked off Orchard Lake St. Mary's.
Mhm.
Knocked off Clarkston. I mean, that Clarkston game, I can recap that one really, really easily. But when you look at the three teams that were in the regionals, Ferndale obviously having a rough one in the regional final against Detroit Edison.
Well, Edison's very good.
Yeah, they're good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean,
They're very
and it was
good.
on the road too. So when
At
you look
Edison.
and when you look at Ferndale, there's a lot of questions. I mean, considering with that program, I mean, like that team was been in turmoil all year long over there.
I think maybe Ferndale's biggest mistake was being in the OAA Red. I think that they took a gamble of moving up to the Red. Having only one program was, it definitely did not. I mean, scheduling became an issue. Don't get me wrong. They are very talented girls. They're very talented girls. Their coaching was it was challenging with the coaching with the head coach stepping down.
With Keith Paris stepping down
Yep.
and Devin Petaway taking in.
Petaway, I thought, did a really good job with that team. He really, really did do a good job with that team, especially toward the end. He did a really, really good job. They were able to win a district championship. They got to the regional final. I think that's quite an accomplishment for Ferndale. But the question is going to be: are those girls coming back, or are they? I mean, the program, they got to start from scratch. And Ferndale needs to move down out of the Red.
They have to, and obviously
They should. I mean, they don't have.
Should. I mean, like
They only have that one program. You know, I mean, that's, when you've got teams that have three programs, like a West Bloomfield or a Clarkston or an Oxford or a Lake Orion or a Rochester, and then Stoney's got two strong programs. It's a scheduling nightmare.
It is, and it really is. So when you look at Ferndale, a lot of questions for them this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at Clarkston, because in that game against West Bloomfield, Eliana Roback got teed up. Ellery Hernandez got teed up. When you look at Clarkston next year, you do have Roback coming back. You have Brooklyn Cobra coming back.
Mm-hmm.
You do lose some key pieces. You lose Hernandez. You lose Ella Margner. You lose Marley Mazer. When you look at the Wolves, what do you think their outlook's going to look like heading into next year?
Well, if knowing Clarkston, their future seems to be bright, because you look at
middle school programs are good.
Middle school programs are good. Their freshman program's very well coached. Their JV program under Coach Losi, who used to be the quarterback at Troy, it's solid. They won the league this year in JV, so definitely. And obviously, you return all that experience back with Roback and Colvert and others. I mean, Goodnow's going to be very solid next year. It wouldn't surprise me if Clarkston's the favorite next year in the OAA Red, just because of the experience.
Do you
alone.
worry about like a little bit of like a trajectory with Clarkston? Do you think they're starting to get a little stale a little bit when you look at this team?
It depends. I mean, Roback and Colvert are going to get the bulk of the shots, so it's going to be very interesting to see if if Aaron can develop that third scorer, and it's going to be interesting if
They gotta get a defensive stopper over there.
it's going to be interesting if Robacker and Culvert are going to cut back on the amount of shots they're taking. It's going to also be interesting to see Clarkson fouls a lot, and Lake Orion took Clarkson to brink, and a lot of that was Lake Orion took advantage of Clarkston's mistakes in the first half, and Lake Orion played well in the first half against Clarkston. In the case against West Bloomfield, Clarkston and West Bloomfield for the most part were neck and neck, and then Roback got her tech, and that kind of changed momentum a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see how Clarkson does, but in my opinion, I think they're the favorite in the Red next year.
They're one of the favorites in the Red next year when you look at what the Wolves have coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at West Bloomfield, and then let's preview that game against Utica Ford 2 in the quarterfinals. It is a difficult match for West Bloomfield going up against a Falcon team that is just really, really disciplined. I mean, one of the best teams in the Macomb Area Conference Red Division. Their only loss this year was to Troy, 45-43.
They had 2 losses.
Oh, they had 2 losses.
They had
excuse
2.
me.
One
Utica
of them was
Eisenhower,
Troy.
and then the other one was Troy. So
Mm-hmm.
talk about Ford and what you've seen with Ford in your eyes and what challenges West Bloomfield is going to have to deal with.
Davis is the real deal. That's the thing. Davis is the real deal for Ford. And then also, you have that connection with Stony Creek because Columbus Williams and Brennan Karras used to coach at Utica Ford.
They were assistants under Coach Matt Joseph over there, yep.
So I'm going to be really curious to see what type of information they give, if any, to Utica Ford. West Bloomfield, if West Bloomfield plays like they're capable of,
obviously Sheridan Beal's gonna have to play well. London Hall's gonna have to play well.
But
and Abel Lord's gonna play
if
well.
they play what they're capable of, they'll be fine. But this West Bloomfield team, they don't have the Davis sisters. They don't have all that experience.
Daphne Washington, they don't have that.
They don't have all that experience. But, same time West Bloomfield did beat St. Mary's. They did beat Clarkston. They beat them twice. They did beat Grand Blanc twice. So, I mean, it's going to be, and then you saw against Lakeland where they struggled, yet they found a way to win.
How much credit that Coach Jerry McAllister's got to get?
He deserves a lot of credit because what he has done, I mean, at first, it was like, okay, when he first came in, it was like Phil Jackson in a way. Darren McAllister had all this talent, and he didn't have to coach very much. He's had to coach more and more every year, and that's a credit to him. He's had to coach more and more, and he's really right now getting the best out of his players right now. What's going to be interesting for him is these next few years with West Bloomfield, because how is West Bloomfield going to handle? Because there is a drop off right now. There is a drop off, and I'm going to be curious to see how, particularly maybe not next year, but more so 2 years, how this will impact West Bloomfield.
And there's a lot of questions when you look at West Bloomfield in 2 years because they do lose Beal, you do lose London Hall. Those are going to be 2 big losses for Darren McAllister. I mean, it all comes down to the direction of the program. You know what I mean?
Well, and Darren McAllister is a great coach, and I feel really, really good that he'll lead them into the right direction. And he's done a great job up to this point.
Whoever wins that game is likely going to be staring at Rockford. And we know how good Rockford is. West Bloomfield's seen them at least 3 times.
Well, Rockford is the state favorite to win it all.
Mm-hmm. And they got a state candidate, Anna Winovich, who's really, she's likely to be the Miss Basketball in the state of Michigan. And then, you look at for West Bloomfield, I don't know if they repeat a state, they go back to back to back, that's going to be incredible.
That would be incredible.
Is it possible? Is it likely they get there? I just don't know if I see it with them, especially.
Never say never.
You never say never, but if they get by Ford, then you're going to have to deal with Rockford, and then there's that possibility either you're dealing with either Belleville or Wayne Memorial in the state final. And
I'll have to check how the semifinals are set up because I don't know if the semifinals are are set up in that way where they see Rockford first.
I think they do see Rockford first. I've looked at the bracket. I think they do see them first.
I would double check it.
I'll take a look, but when you look at,
but West Bloomfield's got to get by Utica Ford first.
they got to get by Ford first. That's not going to be easy. Of course, Utica Ford, we know what they shared the MAC Red title with Utica Eisenhower. We know what Eisenhower's done. They knocked off Stony Creek. And then, of course, they lost to Clarkson in the district semifinals, regional semifinals.
Ike's future's bright.
Their future's bright. They got the Turner twins, who's done a really nice job. I mean, I watched your Stony Creek game. Whole game changed when Merrick Schlabach got teed up late in the second quarter in that game, in that district final, which really changed the fortune for Utica Eisenhower. They were the ones that kept ahead, and then, and had to survive that late. Now, albeit there was some controversy in that game. But I just think, when you look at teams to really watch for in the future, Utica Eisenhower is going to be one of those teams to really, really watch.
Non-OAA conversation.
Right, and that's one of the teams to really keep an eye on.
I would say in the OAA, you keep an eye on for next year would probably be Troy. Troy might be one to consider with Diamond Prince back.
Prince back. Macy Zider.
Yep.
Carly Higginbottom.
Yep. Athens' future is very bright, especially with their sub-varsity classes.
They don't have a lot of size, which is a concern when I look at Coach
But they work hard.
Team. They work hard, yes.
I do think that as far as we're looking at all these other teams, I definitely would say Berkeley, their future's bright.
Clay's done a nice job at that team.
He's done a nice job.
A nice job.
Obviously in the red, you're thinking, okay, you have Clarkston. You can't count Stony Creek out ever.
Who they got coming back?
Oxford, Lake Orion. I mean, they're consistent.
And you really look at the consistency. Obviously, when you look at in girls basketball, you always got to look at those red teams, those red heavyweights. The Clarksons, the Lake Orions, the Oxfords, the Stony Creeks, the Rochesters. I mean, West Bloomfields. I mean, you really look at those, and those are the teams to really keep an eye on heading into next year.
It'll be interesting.
It'll be very interesting to see how girls basketball looks as we head into the next season.
And then Waterford United comes in.
Waterford United's really interesting because they lose 7 seniors, but they got Sartorius coming back. That's big for them. She's only going to be a sophomore. Yep. So there's going to be a lot of, Waterford could be a team to really watch for as we head into the future. Obviously, we don't know how the MHA is gonna handle this. I mean,
don't know how the OA is gonna handle.
The OA is gonna handle it.
Alignment.
Right? The division alignment. You got districts. Back coming up in June.
Yep.
Your thoughts on this before we go? Does the MHA look at a shot clock? What's your thoughts? Because this has been a real, and then also another one is, should the top seed in the district host the district?
I'll answer the second question first. I think teams put in for it, and the teams that put in for it should probably be the ones that are allowed to host. I know that there's a lot of there should be the hosting that the number one seed should host districts. I don't agree with that. I think that the team who puts in with the MHSA, because the thing is, there are teams that don't want to host a district game. There are teams who don't want to host regionals or quarterfinals. You know what I'm saying? There's teams that want to host district games. They should be given first dibs as far as hosting. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then the second one, the whole shot clock. I know that it's been a topic of discussion. I know that a lot of coaches really see how the offensive game has grown. But I don't know. I mean, in terms of development, it varies. I mean, if you play stall ball, there's a lot of teams that play stall ball. Obviously, those situations might need to be looked at. But, from I don't want to hire another clock keeper just for shot clock. I don't want to have another, so I'm pretty much personally, I'm not a fan of the shot clock. And as far as like teams hosting districts, I think if the MHSA wants a team to host a district, and a team wants to put in for it, that team should be allowed to host a district. It shouldn't be the number one seed that hosts the district. I mean, you could have a team whose facilities or whose like staff organizers are not the greatest, and they could be the number one seed, and it could be very overwhelming. Or you could have potentially a situation where like somebody that's not capable of like being the main book or something like that, or a quality book or a quality clock keeper, and it could be that type of situation where they become the main and then also what I think people forget too is the revenue. You only get 10% out of any gate, so if you're thinking about a playoff format and then also press coverage, the press coverage, you'd rather have it at one place.
Yes.
So it is, people are going to have other opinions on it. It's just, and we're probably going to get some blowback for it. But bottom line is, I just think that, people are going to have their own opinions and they're allowed to have those opinions. And that's the beauty of having discussions like these.
Hey, I'm History Now host Anthony Taormina here. Thank you for joining us here this week here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I know that a lot of people look up to you. I know a couple of kids that watch or that listen to your podcast. You do a fantastic job with researching. You do a fantastic job with influencing a lot of other Twitter feeder, a lot of people on X and Instagram and those types of things. I look at it. I look at these. I'll give a shout inside the OAA. I'll give him a shout out because I really believe he looks up to you and what you do, and I think there are others too. You look back at kids from like Lake Orion and Oxford and Troy, Athens, today that are alumni as well, and they give you a lot of credit for Berkeley and, Clarkston. And they give you a lot of credit for, you deserve all the credit that you get for hosting something like this. And ONTV gets a lot of credit too for running something like this. Obviously Media Day, for football and then boys basketball. Those are all, you deserve a lot of credit for that.
Thank you really much. All right, everyone, we're signing off here. Make sure you follow the blog at SagamBay4650 at blogspot.com for the latest information around the OAA. Take care, God bless, and I will see you all next week. Everybody take care, and I'll see you then. God bless all, and see you next week. God bless all.